Narayanam namaskritam naram jeva narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tato jayodyara nashna pareshu bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamashoki bhaktir bhavati naistiki nigama kaparurgaritam param shukamakaram rita dravisamitam pipata bhagatam rashamadhyam ahora horishikuvekam Krishna sadam apagate dhammagina hishaha karonashta dishamisha parana kodinoditam Tramapia Dabhishuta Vishutam Vibhusam Apyadayana Vidambirvaksaram Prakyahiduho Mahorari Tatanam Sanklesha Nirvana Musanti Nanyataham Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sanyavadi Praskita De Satadine Om Magyanati Maranasyangarangana Sarakya Chaksurunmilitam Yana Tajmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Swayam Rupakaramayam Tarati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamanam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Larita Shivishakan Vitam Scha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Good morning, Suprabhatam, as they say in India. Supraha Bhatam. Good morning, Jean. Good morning, Govinda Dev. Govinda Dev finished a trial last week, so we're getting to see more of him these days now that his trial is over. Good morning, Sundari Priya. Thank you all for joining us on this Wisdom Wednesday. Like the bee who repeatedly goes back to a flower that has lots of honey, we're plunging into the 8th verse, 5th chapter, 1st canto of the Bhagavatam, for the 6th consecutive session in a row. It's one of my favorite verses, and it has a nice ring to it in the Sanskrit. Bhavatano dito prayam yasho bhagavatam balam ye naivashu natusheta manye twad darshanam kilam. See, Narada is speaking to his disciple, Vyasadeva, who is also the compiler of the Vedic literatures, and Sri Narada is speaking from experience as well. He says to his dependent, you have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the personality of Godhead. That philosophy which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of a Lord is considered worthless. And those who are engaged in the devotional path, whose sights are param beyond this material world, imagine this world as an inverted bowl with the sun up there in the sky. The wise King Solomon from the Bible in Ecclesiastes said, vanity, vanity, vanity. Every pursuit that is limited to the confines of this inverted bowl, what we can see on the edge of the horizon to the limits of the sky with the sun up there hung in the sky, everything is temporary. Everything is vanity, vanity, vanity. All is vanity. So those who are intelligent realize that we're not byproducts of matter. We're parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we don't originate anywhere within this material bowl. Our origin is neither through gross matter nor subtle matter. Our origin is from a different source altogether. It's from spirit. Our home lies beyond the bowl of this material world. And so our sights are set on that which is no longer material. And for one who pursues devotional service after the ways of the great authorities, he or she has no longer any interest in pursuing material engagements in the service of matter. These are what Prabhupada calls concocted duties under the names of social service, community service, national service, dog service, automobile service, and so many other services conducted under the illusion of I and mine. Yashatma buddhi kunapetri dahadike swadihi kadatradishu yatirta bubhi saritenigan janishu abignishu saeva gocharaham, whose intelligence is limited to this flesh and this mind, who thinks the byproducts of this body are one's own, that the land of one's birth is sacred and worshipable is considered a man totally in illusion. And such a person wastes their life by pursuing duties which are concocted based on one's misidentification with this body. The devotees are of a different order altogether. Krishna says, Sanisha sarvabhutanam yasham jagati bhutani, yasham jagati bhutani, sanisha pasyato muri. What's night for the materialist is day for the spiritualist. What's night for the spiritualist is day for the materialist. You find them all together on different paths, and there the twain shall meet. Elsewhere it is said, akarma karma cha karma cha sabudhi memanushu sa yukdakrit karma krit. The materialist thinks the spiritualist is wasting his time. He's not earning money. He's not putting money in the bank. He's not increasing the size of his house, the sizzle factor of his car. He's not able to afford the latest fashionable clothes, the latest gadgets. The materialist thinks that the spiritualist, by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare, is basically wasting his time with no goods to show for his efforts. And yet those same goods a few years from now will be rotting, rusting among the weeds somewhere in a junkyard. The things that we hanker after, that we sell, compromise the valuable days and moments of our lives for, will be simply an eyesore. We'll zone our community in such a way as to keep the junkyards somewhere else. Those are the things that we bled for, that we sacrificed for, and yet we can't wait to get rid of them a few years later after they've lost their luster. There used to be a song, General Custer lost his luster. So the things that we hanker for today will have totally lost their luster tomorrow. That's why the spiritualist looks at the materialist and thinks that he's totally wasting his time. Those who are spiritually awakened realize that that which never ceases to exist, the body never endures, the soul never ceases to exist. If you're going to spend time, invest time and energy, why don't you invest it in that which is permanent rather than that which is will-o'-the-wisp, phantasmagoria? The soul is eternal. The soul will outlast this body. The soul preceded this body. Natu evaham, yatu nasham natam neme janadipa, natchaivanavavisami, sarvavaya matapara. Krishna says to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Najayate mriyate vakadacham nayam bhutva naboya ajo nijo shashatoya nahanyate hanyana siryare. The soul is not ever slain. It is the body which is slain, but the soul is never slain. Never was there a time that the soul came into existence, nor will there be a time in future when the soul goes out of existence. So therefore, why not, whatever energy and thoughtfulness and planning you put into the soul will never be in vain. Otherwise, all is vanity, quoting the King Solomon. For the spiritualist, every endeavor of the materialist is a total waste of time, because everything will be vanquished in the sands of oblivion. A poem comes to mind from Pierce Blythe Shelley. I met a traveler from an antique land who said to vast and trunkless legs of stone, stand, half sunk in the desert. Beside them a shattered visage lies, whose sneer and wrinkled lip and frown of cold command tell that well the sculpture those passions read which yet survive, stamped on those lifeless things, the hand that mocked them, the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far and far away. Is it any wonder then that as soon as one gets an inkling of devotional service by associating with a bona fide spiritual master, reading his literatures, this is the immediate result. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojito Janayati Shivayagram Gyanam Chiyad Ahaitukam. One ceases to engage in those activities, pursuits, which are worthless, cultivates detachment from the temporal, attachment for the eternal, and knowledge of the difference between the two. The exact translation of this 7th verse from the 2nd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I don't know if Prashant's jumped on board yet with all of his wonderful quotes or not. I don't see his name yet. Anyway, it says, by rendering devotional service under the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. And remember, Krishna says, Natu evaham jatu nasham, natu deva aham. Krishna says he's eternal. He's the supreme singular eternal, from whom all the infinitesimal plural eternals come. We rest. Our existence exudes, emanates, rests, and is maintained. The plural eternals come from and depend upon the singular eternal, and both of them being qualitatively equal, like the sun and the sunshine, both have the qualities of light and heat. Similarly, both the Lord and his parts and parcels are eternal. So why should the eternal luminous part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead muck around in this material world of birth, death, disease, and old age? It does not become him. Chaturvida bhajate mam jana sukriti arjuna gyanicha bharatarshava. 4 types of people begin to emerge from the misery and ignorance of this material world and engage in the service of the Lord. Those who are distressed, those who are in seek of money, of prosperity, bettering their situation, those who are curious, and those who are situated firmly in transcendental knowledge. And even if you don't approach devotional service out of knowledge, maybe you're distressed, maybe you want money, maybe you're just mildly curious, knowledge will come. The 2 byproducts, automatic byproducts of devotional service, are knowledge of the difference between spirit and matter, knowledge of who you are as an eternal living being, and detachment from all the things that are a waste of your time. I think you'll all agree that's a good thing. Nobody likes to waste their time. Certainly the materialist, he doesn't like to take any time off from making money and pursuing others out of a fear of competition and envy in the rat race. I remember one devotee, he spent some time in Utah, and he did devotional service. And after a while, he got material desires again. And he said, I've got to go to work. I've got to get a job in a shop. He said, I've got to make some real money. He says, I'm what did he say? I've got to catch up. And I was like, what are you talking about? You got to catch. In other words, he started to think he'd lost so much time performing devotional service that now he was falling behind in the rat race. But it's a rat race. Why should you care what the rats are doing? No offense intended. It's just a literary example, analogy. So here are 5 symptoms of those who are blessed by knowledge and detachment and who don't waste their time pursuing things that just don't matter. Here are 5 symptoms. One is one doesn't worship the demigods, even for elevation to the heavenly planets. As attractive as Vyasadeva has made that seem in the Vedas, they are poisonous fruits. They are like in Odysseus in the Odyssey, there was that island where the women were singing beautiful songs. They would attract them in from the ship onto the shore, and then they would kill them. Circe and her sirens, that's the name of them. So the flowery words of the Vedas enticing you to taste the fruits of the Vedic literatures like elevation, heavenly planet, beautiful wife, long lifespan. These are poison fruits. They will simply lure you to the heavenly planets. Then you'll waste thousands and thousands of years enjoying insubstantial heavenly enjoyment. If the heavenly planets are $100, the spiritual world is $10 million. So why should you, with the same amount of effort, you can get $100 million as it will take you to get $100. That's why Krishna says, Yanti Deva Brajajatam, Yanti Madhyagino Pama. The worshippers of the demigods go to the demigods, but my worshippers come to my supreme abode. Those who go to the heavenly planets on the strength of their pious activities, when those pious activities are exhausted, they fall back down and take birth as a human being, and they're right back where they started again. But over and over again, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, those who go to my supreme abode, yat gatva na nivartate, never return, never fall back again to this material world. Granted, oh good, Prashant is on board. He's coming through with all of these. Yayamam pushvitam bacham prabhavati vedavatara nanyada karmatmakam shvargau param janma karma kriya vishashi bhogaishwarya gatim. One falls back down from the heavenly planets, just like a Ferris wheel, going up and down, up and down, up and down. Nothing is ever substantially accomplished. But those who worship the lotus feet of the Lord, they go back to live with the Lord, never again to return to this material world. That's the first thing that falls to one side when one worships Krishna. The second is the desire to serve anyone other than Krishna. Why should we? By serving Krishna, we serve all of the living beings. If you love the Father, you already automatically love all of his parts and parcels, isn't it? If you water the root of the tree, the branches, branches, leaves, and flowers will automatically be nourished. So if you can do one thing that accomplishes every other desirable thing, why wouldn't you do that? It would relieve you of so much anxiety. Abraham Lincoln said, we can please some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. And why would you want to even try? It's a formula for being upset, for feeling unworthy and negative. Just please the one supreme Lord of all that be. And when he's pleased, everybody else will be pleased. And the activities of the devotees are simply welfare works on behalf of other living beings. The other living beings may not always appreciate the welfare work. They may see it as extracurriculatory or unnecessary. They see themselves as matter. They see material acquisition as all in all. But the devotee knows better and works on their behalf, sometimes even against their will. We don't go toe-to-toe, try to argue people into accepting our position, but within ourselves, we pray for them. We give them prasadam. We let them hear the holy name. And we hope that this will affect enough of a cleansing in their heart that the desire to hear about Krishna will somehow arise. And then they'll get on the path back to home, back to God. We'll continue our list of 5 things which fall away from a practicing devotee. But let us pause for a moment to thank Prashant for coming through with all of these nice quotes from the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Rupa Manjari, appreciate your coming on board. Bhakta Gary, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, the third area of activities that falls away from one whose priority is devotional service is a desire to work for sense gratification without understanding one's relationship to Krishna. Sense gratification has to be there one way or another. God is sentient, we're sentient. You cannot take sense gratification off the table. You cannot take sense gratification off the equation. And here's a point. We're all self-concerned. We're all self-interested. You really can't deny that. We say, oh, you got to give up sense gratification and work for Krishna's sense gratification. Sense gratification is bad. Sense gratification is common to the animals. So in a human being that's after sense gratification is no better than an animal. And all that's just kind of negative, down-putting statements. No, let's be honest and admit we want sense gratification. We want the best, most high quality, and let's say it, pleasurable experience that we can have in this human form of life. So rather than saying, give up sense gratification, this is bad, that's bad, let me just put it slightly differently. You get your best sense gratification not separate from Krishna, but through Krishna. Go ahead. Aspire after sense gratification. But let me tell you, the highest, most sublime, unlimited level of sense gratification is through Krishna. Try to please Krishna's senses, and because we're part and parcel of Krishna, the best way to please your senses is to focus on pleasing Krishna's senses. That's the secret of merging selfishness and devotional service. Everything has to be in our self-interest. That's just the way we're wired. What's in it for me? People are only going to be attracted to devotional service if they see what's in it for them. So we say, get your prosperity, get your satisfaction, get your pleasure, get your sense gratification through Krishna and not independent of Krishna. Good morning, Rob. Good morning, Lakshmi. I don't know if you've been listening to what we've been saying. Do you have a comment so far, or do you need to get up to speed here? We're going through the 5 activities which one is engaged in devotional service leaves off. The first one is one ceases to worship the demigods for elevation to heavenly planets. The second is one leaves off the desire to serve anyone other than Krishna. The third is one seeks for one's sense gratification only through Krishna and not apart from Krishna. And the fourth one, right now we're getting to, is the desire to cultivate impersonal knowledge and thereby forget the Supreme Lord. Devotees see monism, the concept of merging or becoming one with the Lord, as total anathema. Narakaiva kaivalyate. Kaivalya means oneness, and naraka means hell. The devotees see merging, giving up their individuality in order to become one with the Lord, not different from the Lord. They see that kaivalya, that oneness, that aspiration for becoming non-different from the Lord, as no different than hell. And why did they do that? Because our aspiration is to love the Lord. And in order to love, you have to be separate from Him. There have to be two to love, back and forth. You serve the Lord, and then the Lord's promises that He serves the devotees. Our hope, our aspiration, our ambition is to capture the Lord with our love. He is an other. We are an other. But we are eternally connected because He created us. He's our loving Father. Later on, it is said that whenever we succumb or submit or surrender or step up into devotional service of the Lord gives a fist pump. That is victory for the Lord when you start chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That is the Lord's victory. Nothing makes the Lord as happy. He could conquer the entirety of Salva's army. He could defeat Jarasandha 17 times single-handedly. But none of that makes him as happy as when one single soul who has been away from him for who knows how long turns their life around, turns their attention to the Lord within the heart, begins to take direction from Him, starts chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, taking only consecrated vegetarian food which is offered to him, visiting the temple, doing service, performing kirtan, japa in the mornings, and associating with devotees. The Lord's like, yes! Yes! So the desire to cultivate impersonal knowledge and thereby lose one's separateness from the Lord is a very idea of hell for the devotees. And the fifth activity which falls away from one engaged in devotional service is, of course, naturally the desire to establish oneself as the supreme, in which endeavor there is no trace of the bliss of devotional service. So whenever you hear somebody say, I'm God, you're God, we're all God, know it for a fact that they are disqualifying themselves from tapping into the bliss of serving God. Obviously, you cannot enjoy the bliss of serving God if you think that you're God. One time in Australia, Prabhupada was giving the evening class in Glebe, in our temple in Glebe in Sydney. And one young boy with long hair and looked a little dazzle-eyed, maybe he was on something, I don't know, during the question period, he said, I am God. Why should I serve God? I am God. And Prabhupada said, how did you become God? And he said, I just willed it. I just willed it. And Prabhupada said, well, then, if you become God by willing it, then before our eyes now, you should by willing it become the Prime Minister of Australia. And he said, can you do that? And the boy said, yes, I can become the Prime Minister by willing it. And Prabhupada said, then become. We're waiting. We're all sitting here in keen anticipation. You become Prime Minister of Australia before our eyes, and then maybe you'll have a little bit of credibility about your premise that you can become God just by willing it. Finally, he admitted that he couldn't become God by just willing it. So, Lakshmi, let me just tick through these again and get your feedback, okay? The activities which devotees see as a waste of time and which they separate themselves from altogether. Number one, the desire to worship demigods. 2, the desire to serve someone other than Krishna. 3, the desire to work for sense gratification without understanding Krishna. 4, the desire to cultivate monism. And 5, the desire to establish oneself as the supreme. What say you, sir?
Well, what I say is, especially with monism, there's a lot to say, but you covered a lot. With monism, there's one Kashmiri Shaivite who said, I do not want to be sugar, but I want to taste sugar. So when monism says, I want to be God, the bhakta, the devotee says, no, I don't want to be God. I want to love God. I want to experience God. So we don't want to be sugar. We don't want to be God. We want to taste the love exchange between God and the devotee, because there's nothing sweeter than that. So therefore, as far as monism is concerned for devotee, there's absolutely no interest at all, no concern for that.
What do you think about it, Rob? I mean, when you first come to Krishna consciousness and you hear us talking about not wanting to become one with God, maintaining our separate identity and serving Him, it's quite different because in yoga circles and in pseudo spiritual arenas and conferences and all, it's very commonly heard about becoming one and merging with God. So, no doubt, when you associate with devotees, you hear a different song, so to speak, altogether. What was your impression when you first heard devotees talking about resisting merging and becoming one with God?
Me personally, I actually connected with that because it seems to me like when you assume that you can become one with God or that you can become God himself, it's rather egotistical. We can't even comprehend like the true nature of God. So how are we to assume that through this material life and the resources and the powers that be here on this planet would allow us to become one with God? And personally, I also feel like, why would he want me to become one with him? I'm so tainted and contaminated with my own issues and vices and material entanglement. So for me, it actually made a lot more sense. I could absolutely see Krishna wanting to be served by us in our limited capacities while not trying to be him, in my eyes.
Exactly. We miss the bliss and anandam buddhi vardhanam when we aspire to merge with the Lord. And moreover, we become offenders because when we think of God, we take away his personal qualities. We take away his smile. We take away his flute playing. We take away his beautiful bodily lieu. We take away any we divest his loving, sweet relationships with his mother and father, Yashoda, and brother Balaram and gopis. We divest that of any real meaning. It's all just allegorical or symbolical. One time, Prabhupada was in Mayapur. There's a road called Bhaktisiddhanta Road, which you have to cross in order to go to the Ganges to take bath. And the road is built up. It's built up about 15 feet in the air because it acts as a dam when the Ganges floods certain times. So you have to go down this steep embankment up and then across and then down. And Prabhupada, of course, used a cane, and he took the arm of one of his younger devotees to take his assistance for going down this 45-degree slope. But when he reached a flat area and he no longer needed his assistance, he roughly brushed that arm aside. And the devotee was like, well, that's gratitude for you. And then Prabhupada explained, he was teaching. It was a teaching moment. He said, this is the monas. You know, they will talk about Krishna and the gopis. They'll even attend kirtans and stand up and dance with this look in their eye and everything. But ultimately, they deny Krishna as the ultimate supreme reality, the absolute truth. And they think that these relationships are just temporary mechanisms by which they can go beyond the form and personality of Krishna and become one. So they become offenders to the lotus feet of the Lord. And you cannot offend the Lord and his devotees and expect to have blessings and favor and special progress in your life.
Yeah, it was I believe Shankaracharya, he said that all form is illusion, because anything with form is temporary. So even the incarnations, the various avatars, they were, from the Mayavad perspective, from Shankaracharya's perspective, that Krishna, Rama, Shiva, Durga, all the personalities were just stepping stones. They were, from his perspective, bhakti was a purificatory act, so that when you became pure, then you begin to realize that you are God and that all form would fade away.
And you also have to put this in historical perspective. Also, you go back, and Buddha rejected the Vedas. People were slaughtering animals on the strength of certain passages in the Vedas. And if you would argue against animal slaughter using the Vedas as evidence, they would counter-argue with other misinterpreted phrases from the Vedas. So Buddha rejected the Vedas, established nonviolence and compassion, got rid of animal slaughter, but he also got rid of any serious Vedic followers there. And then 500 years later, after the animal slaughter problem was pretty much under control, Krishna wanted to bring people back to the Vedas, but he knew that because Buddhism had no concept of a supreme, loving personality of Godhead, it would be too much to get them all the way back to the pure theistic conception of the Vedas. And so he just asked for volunteers up there in the spiritual world, who's willing to go down and preach monism, bring people back to a monistic interpretation of the Vedas. And then later on, I'll come as Lord Chaitanya and bring people all the way back. So no one wanted to do it because devotees, they don't resonate with monism at all, and they think that there's no greater disservice that one can do than to preach monism. And so nobody wanted to do it. It's kind of like before Ram descended, he knew that if he didn't get challenged there in the palace in Ayodhya, he would never be forced to go into exile in the south. He would never confront Ravana and never fulfill his mission of destroying the demons and protecting the devotees. For Ram, Paritanaya Sadhana Vinasya Dushkatam could never have been accomplished if he had not been betrayed in the palace. So he asked for volunteers, up in the spiritual world, who's willing to come down with me and betray me? And nobody would do it. Betray you? Lord, I can't. I'm your servant. I can't stab you in the back. But of all the servants, Kaikeyi was the one who agreed to accept the thankless task of betraying the Lord, leverage him out of the comforts and stability of the palace, so that then the confrontation with Ravan would take place and he would fulfill his mission. So in the same way, of all the devotees, only Lord Shiva, who stepped forward, seeing an opportunity to do unique, unparalleled, in fact, thankless service for the Lord, and he agreed to come down. And in his own words, he said, I'm going to mislead people away from the true conclusion of the Vedas because it's not time yet. It's not time yet. They're not ready to come all the way back. So I'm going to play a role, just like you have wood, then you have smoke, and then you have fire. So Buddha was the wood, Shankaracharya was the smoke, and he knew that later on, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the fire. Fire is the only thing you can really work with. It's the only thing that's really usable. But first you have to have wood, then you have to have smoke, and you have to have fire. So Shankaracharya agreed to be like the smoke. He said, in his own words, I'm going to mislead people into a monistic conception of merging with the Lord and set the stage for Lord Chaitanya, who will later come and teach his sublime doctrine of Achinta Abheda Tattva, that we're one with the Lord, but only in quality. We're different from the Lord in quantity. So sometimes it's said poetically that Buddha leveled, he did the site work for the temple, Sankaracharya built the temple, and then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu put the deity in the temple itself.
And another thing that it's very, I'm glad you said that, because it was really a good bit of history that we needed to. The other historical context is that even while they were doing that, they did not, they meaning the Supreme Lord and his infinite wisdom, did not forget bhakti, because simultaneous around the time, or maybe even a little bit before Shankaracharya, there was a rejection of ritualism, the Vedic ritualism, because it had become so corrupt. And it was embodied by the Alwars. The Alwars around 600 AD took the worship of the Supreme out of the temple and with the rituals, and they were writing beautiful love songs to Krishna and to Narayan and Vishnu. And then you see that whole progression up to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You still had bhakti and its presence, because then you had Ramanujacharya come around the 11th century, and then Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya. So all of this preparatory work, so to speak, for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was done on many different fronts. Level the playing field, build up again an acceptance of the Vedas and the Vedic performances, but simultaneously, while rejecting the rituals, keeping intact the purity and the bhakti presence via the Alwars, the 12 Alwars, and other personalities leading up to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Yes, and even Sankaracharya couldn't resist at the time of his leaving his body, telling his disciples, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Mudha Mate. He said, you fools, you actually believe what I preached. He says, actually, it was all covered. It was covered Buddhism. And it had a short-term limited purpose. But your long-term purpose, that might have been Preya. But your Shreya, your long-term purpose, is to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as Krishna, Govinda, Madhusudan, etc., etc. The supreme occupational duty, according to Vyasadeva, after he was inspired by his guru, Narada Muni, to write the Srimad Bhagavatam as the summum bonum of all his literary works, it is said very early on in the Bhagavatam, Savai pum parodamo yato bhakchira haitaki ahaitaki apatiya yayatma shuprashidati. That supreme occupation for all humanity is that by which one can attain to loving devotional service unto the Transcendental Lord. This is called bhakti. But how do we know if it's real bhakti or if it's fake bhakti. Real bhakti means I'm an eternal part serving my eternal Lord. As I'm doing here and now, I will continue after liberation to serve the lotus feet of the Lord as a separated living entity. The one serves now in order to serve later. The end and the means are one. That is pure bhakti. It's called ahaitaki apratiyata. It's unmotivated and it's uninterrupted. If someone talks about bhakti and experiencing the bhav, but their end goal is to become one or merge with the Lord, that is not bhakti. By its symptoms, you know it is counterfeit, because real, genuine bhakti is unmotivated. I don't do it for any selfish, personal reason. Neither do I ever think that there will be a time when my bhakti will be interrupted. It will be a flow, an uninterrupted, unending flow of love, which may begin here, but it will continue on eternally in the spiritual world. And you hear a lot about bhakti nowadays, and there's even a big bhakti fest. But if the litmus test, sometimes they used to, in the old days, determine whether gold was really gold. They used to bite it. I'm not sure how that worked, but they would bite the gold, and then they would know for sure one way or another. So yeah, there might be people talking about bhakti. There might be lots of kirtans. There might be bhakti fests. There might be some of those terms thrown around. But remember, your eternal soul is in question here. Whether you're going to be a devotee, a loving, whether you're going to capture the Lord with your love, or whether you're going to be an offender and get stuck where you are amongst all the other offenders. So we're trying to give you those tools. A man, he's just sold his life savings, he's sold his house, he's sold his car, and he wants to take all those liquid assets and invest in gold. Okay, but he needs to educate himself before what is actually gold. If he takes everything naively out into the street and announces, I have $500,000, I want to buy $500,000 of gold, but he doesn't know what gold is, he's going to end up with fool's gold. He's going to end up being cheated. So we've got the valuable assets of this human form of life. We've got our talents, our abilities. Let's make sure we know what is bhakti and who is the Supreme Lord and who we are before we go investing valuable time and energy of our life in just any Tom, Dick, or Harry who claims to be preaching and practicing bhakti. A word to the wise out there, you guys out there in cyberspace. Of course, I may be preaching to the choir. Maitreya, Raleigh, Bipin Shah, you guys are all practicing bhakti yogis. Anavyangi, Sundari Priya, Jai Krishna Das, Bhakti Gary, Celia, Jennifer, Dolly, Natasha, Jean. The majority of you are already clued in. You're shrewd enough to have educated yourself the difference between real bhakti, genuine gold, and fool's gold or pseudo gold. So anyway, we've done our due diligence here. You can take it from here. But Vyasadeva says unequivocally, the highest activity you can do. And if this is the highest activity, why would you do anything else? Why wouldn't you just do this full time? Is Savaya is that which culminates in unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service to the Lord. And Prabhupada says, in the lower stages of human civilization, there is always competition to lord it over the material nature. In other words, a continuous rivalry to satisfy the senses. And driven by such desire for sense gratification, one turns to religion. So most of the people, even those who are performing religion or performing yoga, are doing so with the desire to gain something material. And if they can catalyze or promote their materialism by going to church, if the preacher or the pastor can encourage them, enthuse them, whip them up into a frenzy for materialism in church, then people will accept religion as a means for economic gain. However, we're cautioned by Vyasadeva, who's the ultimate authority on religion. He wrote hundreds of thousands of books on kama, dharta, artha, moksha, the four areas of sense gratification, economic development, liberation, and religiosity. And he's cautioning you, kam esya nindriyapatir. Kama means those lusty desires for indulging in sense gratification. He says human form of life is not given to us just to engage in sense gratification. The animals do that, but we've been given a special body, a special concession with a special intellect to understand that sense gratification is the activity of the animals, one who sells out the human form of life in order to become a polished animal, enjoying sense gratification on a higher, more polished level than the animals, is really just no better than a two-legged animal. Ultimately, human life, and especially religious life, is never meant for cultivating sense gratification. It's meant for cultivating liberation. Because the churches used to preach liberation and people are no longer interested in liberation, they're interested in sense gratification, Prabhupada says most of the churches are vacant. Now, which churches are flourishing? From a sociology of religion point of view, I'll put forward my own theory here for what it's worth. Mostly churches are dwindling and shrinking, but we do see some mega churches arising. And what's common? They're promising people sense gratification, that God is there for no better or higher purpose than to give you sense gratification, to promote you in your office, in your job, to cement your family relationships together, to make you the patriarch of a big dynasty of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and ultimately to bring you back home, back to Godhead, after you've indulged yourself up to the neck in sense gratification. And the end result of that is to cultivate enjoyment for and attachment to this material world. And we see that the flavor of religion in America is not enthusiasm, fervor to get back home, back to Godhead. In that area, people are more or less indifferent. Fervor is to improve myself in competition with others for sense gratification. That's what we're really interested in. That's what we want to hear from the pastor. That's why we go to church. That's why we support religion in the Kali Yuga age. That is not the purpose of the human form of life, nor is it the purpose of religion. Sense gratification is there, as I said, but through the Lord. The Lord has to be first place. The Lord has to be our priority. And over and above our family, our work, our recreation should be service of the Lord. Everything should be filtered through the Lord. We're not saying give up your family, give up your career. That's not what we're saying. We're not even saying give up sense gratification, but read my lips. Whatever you do, yad karosi, yad ishnosi, yad josi, yad, whatever you do in recreation, in domestic family affairs, in your career, at church, do it as an offering to the Lord. Through the Lord, your life will be fulfilling, meaningful, and successful. Am I wrong, Lakshmi?
You are 100% spot on.
I'm always
what I
wrong.
was
I'm
thinking,
always
there's
wrong. But if I can quote Vyasadeva, then I become right.
Yeah, that's all of our position. We verify what we say through Shastra. But the thing is, this prosperity religion concept, that you're really worshiping God when you're prosperous, because that's how you know you're successful. That's no more than warmed up karma kanda. You know, that's what it is. We do rituals, we go to church, whatever we do because there's benefit in it for us. And really that's karma kanda. You know, that I do whatever I do. It's a very selfish motivation to worship God in whichever manifestation one focuses on. But Rupa Goswami you probably know the Sanskrit. It slips my mind right now. Unalloyed devotion unto the Lord is rendering devotional service in a way that is favorable to the Lord and free from any extraneous motive, such as karma, jnana, or other selfish desires. The Sanskrit
Anya
slips
bilasita
my
sinyam jnana
there.
karmarya
That,
anukulena Krishna bhaktir uttama. That's pure devotional service. That's real bhakti, not pseudo
that's
bhakti.
bhakti. Yeah,
Of course,
that's true.
even people who, practice pseudo bhakti, do kirtan for extraneous reasons and all, if they meet pure devotees of the Lord, then they can be put back on the right path. They can take out those impure elements. I was hearing a talk by Gauranga Darshan last night about Vena. The sages killed Vena because he was such a corrupt and cruel king. But then they needed a king because as soon as Vena died, all the rogues and thieves came out. So they needed a king. So they got permission from Vena's mother, Suniti, to churn him. They churned his arms and legs. So the father of Vena was Anga, who was a pure devotee, and his mother was Suniti, who was the daughter of death. So all of Vena's cruelty and all came from his mother's side. But he also had, at least latently within him, the qualities of a pure devotee, although none of them manifest in him personally. So the sages churned his arms and legs, and the first thing that came out were all the impurities, and that came in the form of a tribal man named Bahuka, a Nishada. And then he ran away into the jungle. So that was the mother's side. All the unwanted things came out of Vena, and they ran away. And what was left was the heritage of Anga, the DNA, the genetic code of Anga, and that resulted in Prithu and Archi. And so similarly, even if you intersect bhakti, pseudo kirtan, still, if you meet in all of that a pure devotee of the Lord, a genuinely unmotivated practitioner of the Lord, then all the misunderstandings can be extracted and you can be left with the pure understanding of bhakti. And if you take hold of the association of the lotus feet of those who are practicing without self-interest and self-motivation, of course, self-interest and self-motivation are there, but again, through Krishna, whatever your desires are, satisfy them through Krishna and not separate from Krishna, then your life can be successful. Rob, you want to wrap it up for us here a little bit while Lakshmi gets his madanga?
I'd be happy to make an attempt, Prabhuji. Yeah, so it definitely had a very common theme to yesterday's class as well, as far as satisfy yourself through satisfying Krishna. And for me, I've been so entangled in the material world that doing it completely selflessly, just doing it just to please Krishna is a hard concept to grasp, because yes, there is that underlying, well, why am I doing it? What am I getting out of it? And so there is that, that motivation in some selfishness, like if I'm not going to get anything out of it, then why would I do it? And so I have to kind of wrap my head around getting satisfaction and true satisfaction through pleasing Krishna, through satisfying Krishna. And putting that into practice is definitely a paradigm shift that will take some work and some dedication to be able to adapt to that mentality.
Very well said, as always, Rob. And yet at the same time, hanging out with devotees, taking prasadam, singing and dancing in kirtan, chanting japa early in the morning, worshiping the deities. It may be a little uncomfortable at first because we're unused to it. What we're used to is just indulging our senses. So it may be a little uncomfortable, but again, as we said yesterday, yataraga vishameva parinoma tatsukam satvikam atma buddhi prasad. That which is a little uncomfortable at first, but was like nectar in the end, is happiness in the mode of goodness. On the other hand, that which is like nectar at first and like poison in the end is happiness in the mode of passion. So just a matter of enduring a little discomfort, a little, like you said, change of paradigm, but the end result is a lifestyle that's much more satisfying, much more blissful, much more fulfilling. And I think you'll agree.
That is
Yeah,
where my
one
selfishness comes in. I want that pure happiness and peace, and that's why I want to, put myself through the course and stay the
Exactly.
course.
Exactly. Good on you. Good on you, Mike. Lakshmi, did you want to say something before Kirtan?
Yeah, I was going to say, you were saying it's a little bit austere, but the process that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave us as coming to us from Srila Prabhupada, etc., is not so austere in that regard, because we have one of the things that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, there's different ways to cultivate bhakti. You cultivate bhakti through the body by using your body in Krishna's service. You cultivate bhakti through the mind, because you're using the mind, studying of Shastra. But one thing he said that was very interesting, you also cultivate bhakti through society. And how do you do that? By festivals, by coming together. What's satisfied by cultivating bhakti through society? What's satisfied is our desire to be with people in association with. That's why projects like yours, which really focuses in on cultivating community and community spirit, is so important, because cultivating bhakti through society satisfies a lot of those social needs. Human beings are social animals. So, to eat nice food, why go to a restaurant? You go to a temple, there's some wonderful prasadam. It's always a disappointment when you go to a restaurant, really, for a devotee, especially devotees who know how to cook. It's like a bummer to go to a restaurant. It's like a waste of money. We don't go to restaurants because every once in a while, when we did go to the restaurant, we were so disappointed. My wife said, why do we spend that money? We should just buy nice ingredients and cook for Krishna. But sometimes you need a little outlet. So cultivating bhakti through society, we sing, we everyone sings, we dance, we have prasadam, we have social gatherings where the function of the social gathering is to glorify the Lord. We come together not to see God, but to be seen by God. That's what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati told his disciples. And when he went to the temple and he took off his glasses and he stood in the back, and they said, Guru Maharaj, you have your glasses off. You probably can't see the deities. And he said, I didn't come here to see Krishna. I came here to be seen by Krishna. So that's just the difference in consciousness, that we do everything for the pleasure of the Lord.
Wow, thank you, Rob and Lakshmi. What wonderful concluding comments. And thanks for those who hit the like button. Ram Kishore, Divya Joshi, Raleigh, Annabelle, as well as Sundari Priya, Jai Krishnadas, Bhakti Gary, Celia, Jennifer, Vaibhavi, Dolly, Natasha, Rupa Manjari, Jean. Thanks for partnering with us and hitting the like button, as well as those who commented. We had comments, of course, Prashant, Govinda Dev, Nitai Morano, and many others. Of course, they've dropped out of sight now, so I can't cite everyone who commented. Let me just read this. This seems interesting. Govinda Dev says, it is official doctrine of the Mormon Church, of which I am a member, that we are all gods in embryo, and that the ultimate goal of existence is to advance to the point where we become a god ourselves and rule over our own kingdom. As man is, God was. As God is, man will become. Well, all right. That's another day. Another day. But thank you for
Another
bringing it.
discussion.
Yeah, another day. So thank you all. Please, if you haven't liked, like. If you haven't commented, commented. If you haven't shared, shared. We have our Patreon page, also patreon.com/Utah Krishnas. If you'd like to look at that, you'll get on not only the audio MP3s of all of our talks, but you'll also get the transcripts as well, which is a special bonus for those of you who have to put together your own talks and your own presentations in your own community. Well, thank you very much for being with us this week for Motivational Monday, Transcendental Tuesday, and Wisdom Wednesday. We'll move on to another verse starting next Monday in the great story of the Absolute Truth, the Srimad Bhagavatam. So let's now feast our ears on another wonderful kirtan by Lakshmi Nrsimha.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Param Vijayate Sri
Go!
Krishna Sankirtanam Harinama Harinami Eva Kevalam Karovana Stevana Stevana Steva Gatiranyata.
Gatiranta.
The Yuga Dharma, the medicine for the age. We've enjoyed being with you these last 3 days. It's always a pleasure. It's always a joy to partner with you in our kata. We'll look forward to being with you all next Monday. Just now, Madhava jumped on. Raquel Castro, good morning. Top of the morning to you all. Thanks for jumping on. We're available throughout the day. These podcasts stay here throughout the day. So if you didn't get a chance to visit them live, you can come back to them later. We'll also post them on our YouTube channel. The Patreon members also get not only a lot of these, but the transcripts as well. So it's always a pleasure. We'll look forward to seeing you next Monday at the very latest, unless you care to join us Saturday night or Sunday night for our motivational Chant for Change talks. We also have a Sangha on Sundays at 11 o'clock. You're welcome to jump in on those too. In the meantime, keep chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.